Well, hello, it is I, Chris Brogan. Welcome to this episode of the news. This is for Thursday, September 7th, 2017. This show is built around a really simple concept. I do a lot of reading in the morning, check out different articles, things I might find interesting myself, and I decided to share them with you. So if you go to chrisbrogan.com/cbm, you can check out the stories for today. You can follow along with or without me, just like that, chrisbrogan.com/cbm. That is how we get this story put together. I find stories that I find are interesting, I connect you to them, and then I think, hey, maybe you'll find this interesting too. Let's get right on to the first article. This one is a little bit of a read. It's not exactly a story that the news just pops out of you. But the question is, should we have more or less technology in the classroom? And the answer is, it's not really the right question to begin with. It's not whether or not we should have more or less technology in the classroom. It's what is the best way for kids to start learning. And so in this article, hey, Mark, how are you? Happy birthday again, Mr. Boy. One of the most important things that we can learn about learning is that this statement right here: learning requires trial, error, making mistakes, correction, feedback, more trial, more errors, and onward onto the road of social interactive learning. Loved this article. It goes along with some parenting advice that I had read very recently that said that we're saying the wrong thing to our kids when we call our kids smart. We should, instead of calling our kids smart, praise them for their problem-solving abilities. Wow, it's great how you took that problem and you handled it and you moved it forward. And this goes with this learning article too. That article is so great. Again, chrisbrogan.com/cbm. You can see all the stories that we're covering for today. This is my reading list. I share it with you because I find it fun. But you're always invited to share your reading list with me, Chris at chrisbrogan.com. Anytime you find a cool article, or fling it to me on Facebook, wherever you know how to reach me, come get me. I don't think I mentioned at the very beginning of this that this is all using Ecamm Live. Go to cbrogan.me/Ecamm Live. It is the best way to do Facebook Live on a Mac. That's how I'm making this show happen. This article is cool because it's talking about if you want to learn how to make better guest experience design, one thing I'm very passionate about when I teach people about how to improve buyer interaction, maybe you should learn for how to bring hospitality into inhospitable environments. Learn from the restaurateurs and hoteliers of the world, and you will come up with much better ways to deliver an experience. So this company is iCrave, who the article is around, and it talks about what kinds of things does it take to make a much better experience. The best connections are visceral, they say. You know, for a brand experience, you want to make up all those moments that we can remember. They could be good or the bad. How to create places and not spaces. We've been trying to make efficiency. We've been trying to make everything fit, but if it's not a place and if it doesn't make sense, it's not going to work out. And then, how do we drive better experience through information? It's kind of a thin article in general, but I loved the points. I thought it was good for you to check out, and I thought that in general, the idea or the concept can be lifted pretty easily. How do you take all of the thoughts that a hotelier has and put it into your own business? We've all had the experience of going to a hotel and wondering what the hell were they thinking, but we've also had the other experience, and we can say, oh, we should learn from this. In the no surprising news to anybody in the world, this is YouTube viewers. Teens complain of too many ads. But this is really important because we're saying, how do we reach people? How do we market better? How do we connect with people? And everyone's most precious demographic, teens, are saying, hey, you got to stop it. This is a little too nutty. It's just not going to work out for us. You've got to really calm it down with the ads. So the question becomes, well, then what do you do? Because, you need to advertise your product. And so what they're saying is least interruptive formats are the most important way to get that done. That's the important point. Hi, Brian, by the way. Soup Nazi was quite memorable. Yes, indeed. Spaces and places. It reminds me a lot of when our tools use us rather than the reverse. Dave, I have a story for you a little later, speaking of that. But sticking with the concept of teenagers, this is an interesting idea. Schools should start later when teen brains are ready to learn. I think I could go with that. My daughter's 15, and I can tell you that she has a lot of trouble getting to sleep at night, and so she wakes up late a lot of times. I have this feeling that a lot of us probably get going at some time in the afternoon. I happen to be an early bird, but a lot of us are not in that category. Oh my gosh, the head of everything at Monahan's fourth largest workwear company has just joined us. Paul, good to see you. Thank you for being part of this today. If you ever have to inherit a company with a bad reputation, or who knows, maybe your company has the bad reputation, there was some good advice in here about what Uber's incoming CEO can learn from GoDaddy's outgoing CEO. Number one was that perception is reality. So one of the things that people are trying to say is that maybe what we need to do is really work on the perceptions that are out there, because it doesn't matter all the other stuff you're doing. So this guy over at GoDaddy, Blake Irving, he did a lot of interesting changes. He said that, GoDaddy changed their look around to make sure that one of the things they were talking about was democratizing entrepreneurialism. I thought that was a good one. The other interesting point they made was that they called buying a website one of the early stages of any business dream. And I thought that was a good thing to look at. So not only did I appreciate the story as far as what Uber's CEO can learn, but I think there's a lot for you and I to pick up in there as well. Hi, Lynette. I agree about high schoolers starting later. Our new school starts nearly 2 hours later, and it makes a huge difference for my 11th grader. See, I love when a story that's like sort of theoretical has some real world interaction to it, and that we can actually know. This isn't, again, in the department of no surprise to anybody. Nobody's using Facebook stories. I don't actually follow a ton of people on Facebook, but of the ones I follow, there's about 2 people I know, 2 total, who use it often. And this story says that now Instagram is letting you push your story to Facebook. I think that's better. I read a lot of Instagram stories, or watch, I guess, a lot of Instagram stories. And I think that this is a good move, because this whole bar up at the top, especially in Facebook mobile, is like wasted real estate in my mind. Not that I ever really particularly care what one social network or another is doing, but it points to the fact that just because a feature may be good somewhere doesn't mean that everyone wants it everywhere. Facebook owns Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp stories are also not going anywhere. No one cares. So it's important kind of a detail. I am one of the first people that wants to say really bad things about the airline industry. I have a lot of dislike for a lot of the things they do, but I'm really proud of them for coming up with the idea of coming out with $99 flights to get people out of Florida. It's a smart move on their part, and it also follows that there was this huge price gouge going on. There was this huge availability and demand just rocketing prices up, and then American, I think, was the first of the U.S. airlines to do this, and then a bunch of others followed suit to make $99 flights out of Florida. And there's 2 things I thought about when I saw that article. One was good for you, airlines. And then I wonder if someone's going to kind of clap back after the fact and say, hey, wait a minute, how come prices can't be, better, all the time? And that's just not how it works. That's, the airlines have to make a profit. They're very expensive. And I talked to a bunch of investor types one time, really richy type people. And one of the things they said about airlines was airlines are actually a loyalty program with an expensive flying problem. Right? So it's the airline cards, the mileage cards, all the data that they collect on those, their little airline credit cards, that's the real business. The flying part is an expense for them to run that business. Isn't that weird to think about? Totally true. Have we entered the age of voice? This article from Chatbots, so you have to really think about the fact that this is on Chatbots magazine. The idea is that once we started getting our iPhones and things like that, everyone used to always say, oh, look how easy it is for little kids to use iPads. And I think that, Brian says, I think JetBlue is first. By the way, I would love to get JetBlue credit for that, because I love JetBlue way more than I love the other airlines. The question is, in the world where iPhones and iPads, everyone says, oh, little kids can use them really well. Well, it's obvious that little kids can use She Who Shall Not Be Named, and also Google Home and those sorts of things. So are we getting closer and closer to making this a world of voice? I feel so. I feel that brands have to really think about how they're going to want to interact in this space, because there's just so many really dopey ones being put out, and there's not enough facility being had. But I think that the interaction, just the opportunity to say something out into the ether and get something back instead of having to work too hard at it is really great. And I think there's lots of bad examples. Samsung's Bixby, which I have now on my new Samsung Galaxy S8, is a piece of poop. And Cortana, she could go to hell. She's just got to get back to Halo. I think she's hitting way above her weight and not anybody's friend. So that's what I think. Let's look at the comments really quickly. Here's my man, Paul Bond. How many social channels can be possible for a single person to engage with properly? I know, it's totally that. Seeing lots of bloggers on Instagram saying, see more of my Snapchat, follow up in the details of my outfit on my Facebook, tell me now. I agree. I think kind of moving people all over the various social platforms is a horrendous idea. That's why I invented years ago the concept of outposts and a home base, and get everybody back to where you most want them to be. Don't ever fall in love with the rented real estate. Brian says Amazon follows the 20% rule. Now that 20% of search is on Bing and Google is voice, there is no doubt. Very good point. Boy, having a guy who wrote the book Be Like Amazon, one of the two guys who wrote Be Like Amazon hanging around, always gives me a whole other set of perspectives. It's always great to have. The technology is still funky on some accents, though, and yes, when people have colds or allergies, they're not recognized by their own laptops. I totally agree. I think there's still a long way to go, but I continue to be amazed at what she who shall not be named can do. Even when I have a mouthful of food and I'm having her set a timer, I thought about just how hard is it to understand me right now because I'm talking with my mouth full, and she still got it done. This story, it's not the story, it's just thinking about the idea, because I had never actually heard of this food chain. Have you ever heard of Fatburger? So evidently Kanye West and Nicki Minaj, well, they're getting ready to go and do an IPO. So Fatburger brands, they also have something called Buffalo Cafe and Buffalo Express. These people are marketing to the idea of, hey, not everyone wants to eat super healthy plant-based foods all the time. And what I like about that is, when you work with your particular business, when you want to call out your business's values and all that, don't kowtow to whatever the current trends are. If you are what you are, then just be what you are and don't really push yourself. To that end, I have a story that backs right into that. I found this so interesting. Japanese people and video games. I get to mix two things that I love a lot. So Nintendo, I do this all the time. Hang on. There we go. Nintendo designer explains why Salmon Run, which is a game type on Splatoon 2 on the Switch, which is an incredibly fun game, is not always available. I loved this article because here's what the guy has to say. He says, in Japan, everything is tailored. You've probably heard of Sheena Iyengar's TED Talk, in which she went to a restaurant in Japan and tried to order sugar in her green tea. The people at the cafe said, one does not put sugar in green tea, and then went on to say, we don't have sugar. But then when she ordered coffee instead, it came with sugar. In Japan, there's a sense of, we're making this thing for you, and this is how we think this is better enjoyed. And this is why in Splatoon, the maps rotate every couple of hours, and the modes change. I bought this game, why can't I enjoy the game the way I want? That's just not how we think here. Yes, you did buy the game, but we made this game. And we're pretty confident about how this game should be enjoyed. If you stick with us and you get past your initial resistance, you're going to have the time of your life with this game. You're really going to love it. That's fascinating to me. It doesn't matter. The buyer is not always right. The customer is not always right. Deal with it. This is how it should be experienced. I think that's interesting. I don't know what to do with that information, but I want you to know that. All right. Brian says, plus the next billion people to join the internet will not be able to write, type, or read, and we'll be moving to more voice and gestures for them. There you go. Oh, JetBlue was first, followed by American, says Brian. He points to a story in the Miami Herald. Paul says, I know a chef that throws people out of his restaurant if anyone dares to ask for ketchup. Oh my gosh, I know the experience. I really, really do. This is my last story of the day. This one is in a very interesting storyline of Lowe's, the home, what do you call them? A customer department store. No, hardware store. Thank you. Words failed me. Has decided to use comic books to imagine sci-fi futures and then turn them into reality. In kind of trying to figure out innovations, they decided to build sort of an incubator, and they've used a whole really strange bunch of ways to do this, and including the fact that they've been doing 3D modeling, they've been doing all kinds of stuff, and they decided to make comic books. And when you read through the comic, the storyline's not all that amazing, but it does start you thinking about, how would you envision the business in a different way? I found myself thinking, how would I use, sort of a futuristic telling of a story to get you to think about your business different? And I loved it. I loved the whole experience of trying to come up with that process. So I'm giving it to you so you can steal it. That's it. Wow. Thank you so much for all the interaction today. Very fun. It's so much different than when I have just like one person here or no people here and I'm just talking to myself. I talk to myself all day as a habit, but it's so great to see your beautiful faces too. And if you get here later, if you get to watch the replay, that's okay. But I love you live. All right. If this was vaguely interesting, go to chrisbrogan.com/CBM. You can find all the news stories that are here. I'm so glad that you liked it and checked it out. Also, if you want to make a story thing like this your own live news show, go to cbrogan.me/ecamlive to check out the best way to do Facebook Live for Mac. Brian says, last comment of the day, HBR had an article a couple weeks ago about how business leaders need to read science fiction, but not for the reasons you think. Thanks, Michelle. Brian, I think that all the time. I think about all the different things that Star Trek inspired. I just covered this last news show about Star Trek tricorders being a thing nowadays, and the fact that we could sit in a room with this device that's going to be able to know enough about our health that it can do some predictive stuff. And so to me, anything like that, I remember when the Nextel phone came out, and, to me, the Nextel phone was like the first example of that sort of experience. So I think that there's a lot of times where, science fiction has really presaged what's going to come out in the real live world. So, my feeling is that we'll see more stories from our imagination than we will from the likes of engineers who technically know how to do something. All right, let's get out of here. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Chris Brogan. This has been The News. See you next time.